Being stalked.
Incredible! Race of giants here! Race of giants!
Just over that rim there, about 100 yards.
This aircraft has gone back into time.
You're 10 years old again, Pip. How come you're 10 years old again?
All the time I need and all the time I want. Time.
Look!
Time.
Look, I swear it isn't me! I swear
You had no dream, Captain.
It's a cookbook! When, nurse? When will I take the bandages off?
I believe you're going my way.
You're riding on a jet airliner en route from London to New York. You're at 35,000 feet atop an overcast and roughly 55 minutes from Idlewild Airport. But what you've seen occur inside the cockpit of this plane is no reflection on the aircraft or the crew. It's a safe, well-engineered, perfectly designed machine. And the men you've just met are a trained, cool, highly efficient team. The problem is simply that the plane is going too fast, and there is nothing within the realm of knowledge, or at least logic, to explain it. Unbeknownst to passenger and crew, this aeroplane is heading into an uncharted region, well off the beaten track of commercial travelers. It's moving into the Twilight Zone. What you're about to see we call the Odyssey of Flight 33. A global jet airliner, en route from London to New York on an uneventful afternoon in the year 1961, but now reported overdue and missing, and by now searched for on land, sea, and air by anguished human beings, fearful of what they'll find. But you and I know where she is. You and I know what's happened. So if some moment, any moment, you hear the sound of jet engines flying atop the overcast, engines that sound searching and lost, engines that sound desperate, shoot up a flare or do something, that would be Global 33 trying to get home from the Twilight Zone. This is Mr. Romney Wordsworth in his last 48 hours on Earth. He's a citizen of the state, but will soon have to be eliminated because he's built out of flesh and because he has a mind. Mr. Romney Wordsworth, who will draw his last breaths in the Twilight Zone. The Chancellor, the late Chancellor, was only partly correct. He was obsolete. But so is the state, the entity he worshipped. Any state, any entity, any ideology that fails to recognize the worth, the dignity, the rights of man, that state is obsolete. A case to be filed under M for Mankind in the Twilight Zone. Mr. and Mrs. John Holt, aging people who slowly and with trembling fingers turn the last pages of a book of life and hope against logic and the preordained that some magic printing press will add to this book another limited edition. But these two senior citizens happen to live in a time of the future when nothing is impossible, even the trading of old bodies for new. Mr. and Mrs. John Holt, in their twilight years, who are about to find that there happens to be a zone with the same name. From Khalil Gibran's The Prophet. Love gives not but itself and takes not from itself. Love possesses not, nor would it be possessed. For love is sufficient unto love. Not a lesson, just a reminder from all the sentimentalists in the Twilight Zone. It may be said with a degree of assurance that not everything that meets the eye is as it appears. Case in point, the scene you're watching.
This is not a hospital, not a morgue, not a mausoleum, not an undertaker's parlor of the future. What it is the belly of a spaceship. It is en route to another planetary system, an incredible distance from the Earth. This is the crux of our story, a flight into space. It is also the story of the things that might happen to human beings who take a step beyond, unable to anticipate everything that might await them out there. Commander Douglas Stansfield, one of the forgotten pioneers of the space age. He's been pushed aside by the flow of progress and the passage of years and the ferocious travesty of fate. Tonight's tale of the ionosphere and irony, delivered from The Twilight Zone. This is the face of Ramos Clemente. A year ago, a beardless, nameless worker of the dirt, who plodded behind a mule, furrowing someone else's land. Then he looked up at a hot Central American sun and he pledged the impossible. He made a vow that he would lead an avenging army against the tyranny that put the ache in his back and the anguish in his eyes. And now, 1 year later, the dream of the impossible has become a fact. In just a moment, we will look deep into this mirror and see the aftermath of a rebellion in the Twilight Zone. Ramos Clemente, a would-be god in dungarees strangled by an illusion. That will-o'-the-wisp mirage that dangles from the sky in front of the eyes of all ambitious men, all tyrants. And any resemblance to tyrants living or dead is hardly coincidental, whether it be here or in the Twilight Zone. A brief, if frenetic, introduction to Mr. Archibald Beechcroft, a child of the 20th century, a product of the population explosion, and one of the inheritors of the legacy of progress. Mr. Beechcroft again. This time, Act 2 of his daily battle for survival. And in just a moment, our hero will begin his personal one-man rebellion against the mechanics of his age. And to do so, he will enlist certain aids available only in the Twilight Zone. Mr. Archibald Beechcroft, a child of the 20th century, who has found out through trial and error, and mostly error, that with all its faults, it may well be that this is the best of all possible worlds. People notwithstanding, it has much to offer. Tonight's case in point, in the Twilight Zone. What you're looking at is a legacy that man left to himself. A decade previous, he pushed his buttons, and a nightmarish moment later, woke up to find that he had set the clock back 1,000 years. His engines, his medicines, his science were buried in a mass tomb, covered over by the biggest gravedigger of them all, a bomb. And this is the Earth 10 years later, a fragment of what was once a whole, a remnant of what was once a race. The year is 1974, and this is the Twilight Zone. Mr. Goldsmith, survivor, an eyewitness to man's imperfection, an observer of the very human trait of greed, and the chronicler of the last chapter, the one reading suicide. Not a prediction of what is to be, just a projection of what could be. This has been the Twilight Zone. Portrait of a man who thinks and thereby gets things done. Mr. Jimbo Cobb might be called a prime mover, a talent which has to be seen to be believed. In just a moment, he'll show his friends and you how he keeps both feet on the ground and his head in the Twilight Zone. Some people possess talent,
Others are possessed by it. When that happens, the talent becomes a curse. Jimbo Cobb knew, right from the beginning. But before Ace Larson learned that simple truth, he had to take a short trip through the Twilight Zone. What you're about to watch is a nightmare. It is not meant to be prophetic. It need not happen. It's the fervent and urgent prayer of all men of goodwill that it never shall happen. But in this place, in this moment, it does happen. This is the Twilight Zone. No moral, no message, no prophetic tract. Just a simple statement of fact. For civilization to survive, the human race has to remain civilized. Tonight's very small exercise in logic from the Twilight Zone. Incident 100 miles off the coast of Guadalcanal, time the present. A United States naval destroyer on what has been a most uneventful cruise. In a moment, they're going to send a man down 30 fathoms and check on a noisemaker, someone or something tapping on metal. You may or may not read the results in a naval report, because Captain Beecham and his crew have just set a course that will lead this ship and everyone on it into the Twilight Zone. Small naval engagement. The month of April, 1963. Not to be found in any historical annals. Look for this one filed under H for haunting in the Twilight Zone. An old man and a hound dog named Rip, off for an evening's pleasure in quest of raccoon. Usually these evenings end with one tired old man, one battle-scarred hound dog, and one or more extremely dead raccoons. But as you may suspect, that will not be the case tonight. These hunters won't be coming home from the hill. They're headed for the backwoods of the Twilight Zone. Travelers to unknown regions would be well advised to take along the family dog. He could just save you from entering the wrong gate. At least it happened that way once, in a mountainous area of the Twilight Zone. What you're witnessing is the curtain raiser to a most extraordinary play. To wit, the signing of a pact, the commencement of a project. The play itself will be performed almost entirely off stage. The final scenes are to be enacted a decade hence and with a different cast. The main character of these final scenes is Ilse, the daughter of Professor and Mrs. Nielsen, age 2. At the moment, she lies sleeping in her crib, unaware of the singular drama in which she is to be involved. 10 years from this moment, Ilse Nielsen is to know the desolating terror of living simultaneously in the world and in the Twilight Zone. It has been noted in a book of proven wisdom that perfect love casteth out fear. While it's unlikely that this observation was meant to include that specific fear which follows the loss of extrasensory perception, the principle remains, as always, beautifully intact. Case in point, that of Ilse Nielsen, former resident of the Twilight Zone. Quitting time at the plant. Time for supper now. Time for families. Time for a cool drink on a porch. Time for the quiet rustle of leaf-laden trees that screen out the moon. And underneath it all, behind the eyes of the men, hanging invisible over the summer night, is a horror without words. For this is the stillness before storm. This is the eve of the end.
To believe there are people there. People like us.
People like us. It's the third planet from the sun, Bill. It's called Earth. That's where we're going. To a place called Earth.
Behind a tiny ship heading into space is a doomed planet on the verge of suicide. Ahead lies a place called Earth, the third planet from the sun. And for William Sturka and the men and women with him, it's the eve of the beginning in the Twilight Zone.
Respectfully submitted for your perusal, a Canamet. Height a little over 9 feet. Weight in the neighborhood of 350 pounds. Origin unknown. Motives? Therein hangs the tale. For in just a moment, we're going to ask you to shake hands figuratively with a Christopher Columbus from another galaxy and another time. This is the Twilight Zone.
We've licked the title anyway.
What does it say? How much does it tell us?
Here it is.
To serve man. I hope so. I fervently hope so.
Please check your guest visas. This is flight number 267 from Earth to our planet.
Mr. Chambers, don't get on that ship. The rest of the book, To Serve Man, it's a cookbook.
No! 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 Ah!
Please, Mr. Chambers, eat. We wouldn't want you to lose weight.
The recollections of one Michael Chambers, with appropriate flashbacks and soliloquy. Or more simply stated, the evolution of man. The cycle of going from dust to dessert. The metamorphosis from being the ruler of a planet to an ingredient in someone's soup. It's tonight's bill of fare from the Twilight Zone. Dramatis personae, Mr. Simon Polk. A gentleman who has lived out his life in a gleeful rage. And the young lady who's just beat the hasty retreat is Mr. Polk's niece, Barbara. She has lived her life as if during each ensuing hour she had a dentist appointment. There's yet a third member of the company soon to be seen. He now resides in the laboratory, and he is the kind of character to be found only in the Twilight Zone. Dramatis personae, a metal man who will go by the name of Simon, whose life as well as his body has been stamped out for him. And the woman who tends to him, the Lady Barbara, who's discovered belatedly that all bad things don't come to an end, and that once a bed is made, it's quite necessary that you sleep in it. Tonight's uncomfortable little exercise in avarice and automatons from the Twilight Zone. Portrait of a TV fan named Joe Britt. Occupation, cab driver. Tonight, Mr. Britt is going to watch a really big shoe. Something special for the cabbie who's seen everything. Joe Britt doesn't know it, but his flag is down, his meter's running, and he's in high gear on his way to the Twilight Zone. The next time your TV set is on the blink, when you're in the need of a first-rate repairman, may we suggest our own specialist, factory-trained, prompt, honest, 24-hour service. You won't find him in the phone book, but his office is conveniently located in the Twilight Zone. Portrait of a nervous man, Oliver Pope by name, office manager by profession. A man beset by life's problems, his job, his salary, the competition to get ahead. Obviously, Mr. Pope's mind is not on his driving. Businessman turned killer on a rain-soaked street in the early evening of just another day during just another drive home from the office. The victim, a kid on a bicycle, lying injured near death. But Mr. Pope hasn't time for the victim. His only concern is for himself. Oliver Pope, hit-and-run driver, just arrived at a crossroad in his life, and he's chosen the wrong turn. The hit occurred in the world he knows, but the run will lead him straight into the Twilight Zone. All persons attempting to conceal criminal acts involving their cars are hereby warned. Check first to see that underneath that chrome there does not lie a conscience, especially if you're driving along a rain-soaked highway in the Twilight Zone.